What's up, guys? It's Agent What If. Man, has it been a while? I'm gonna be completely honest. I'm gonna have to yap for a quick second before we start this What If. But on a complete side tangent, I did not mean for it to be like a year or pretty damn close to that if it isn't since I last uploaded. But I just kind of stopped. I wasn't really feeling inspired, and a lot of stuff was coming out and happening, so I just wasn't really doing too much. But I am going to start posting videos, especially if this one does well. So I'll say it right now to get out the way. A little quick shameless plug. If you guys like the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Oh, and also start leaving y'all what if comments in the videos comments, because I definitely want to know, and I have heard a couple interesting ones, and I am making those right now. So just let me know. I'm kind of like a blank canvas right now. So yeah, without any further ado, let's begin. We start out this story quite similarly to most other stories, but also not as similarly. We do start off in a hospital, but instead of Izuku's birth, we first see a doctor looking at charts. For some reason, the doctor seems very, very alarmed. He's sweating profusely, and he doesn't quite know what to do. This doctor happens to be bald and wear glasses. I think you see where I'm going with this. The doctor is rushed, panicked, but he's trying his best not to let anyone see it. He begins to walk quickly towards the birth of Izuku, or at least where it's happening. Inko screams from the pain of, giving birth and her contractions. The doctor walks in, and a man notices him and tells him immediately to get out, but he says that he's there to register his quirk. The doctor says that he's barely been born and there's no proof that he'll have a quirk that manifests immediately, so they need all of the space. The doctor counters him and they begin to have a mini argument until Inko starts having more serious contractions as her birth hurries along more quickly. The doctor then turns around and tells him to sit in a corner and be quiet so that they can focus on delivering the baby. After a couple more strenuous minutes of Inko stressing and straining and pushing, she eventually does give birth to little baby Izuku. Now, he does happen to look quite similarly to his father. These are seen by the fact that he has very pale skin with freckles like his mom, but he also seems to have grayish hair, like an ashen gray. Inko cradles her baby as she's just finished such a taxing ordeal, and she begins to slowly drift off as the doctors come to grab the baby, clean it, wrap it. Well, they've already done that since they gave it to her, but you get what I'm saying. As they take the baby away, she begins to slowly drift off. We see the doctor slowly make his way behind the baby as the baby's taken to a little facility on the off corner of the wing for the quirk children, well, pretty much all children, and he's being watched by the doctor. He begins to take notes, anything and everything, the baby's physical appearance, how it looks, the eyes, even the way the baby breathes. The doctor knows immediately what this means, but he's done enough, so he leaves. We then have a quick little time skip to Izuku at 5 years old. Unlike most of the children Izuku lived around, he happened to be very wealthy. He never really knew where all the money came from because his mother, to his knowledge, never worked or had a job, but for some reason they always were really well taken care of. They lived in a nice neighborhood in a rather quiet, quaint community. Everybody knew each other here, and it was all very, very nice in a word. As he began to run around his expansive house, he began to touch things and push things and wonder. His mother was sitting there waiting for him, and she gestured him up onto the couch as they began to watch his favorite TV show. It was All Might. Now, Izuku had, for a while, been very, very obsessed, to Inko's dismay and to her eardrum's dismay, that her child had been so obsessed with All Might. This was his favorite pastime. He would constantly, and I do mean constantly, rewatch a video of All Might saving a whole bunch of people over and over and over again. It was like his or their daily ritual. Inko didn't mind though. She didn't mind that her child aspired to be such a good person and to save people. So in her mind, it was just what children did. This time in particular, Izuku seemed to be very focused. He calmed down. He didn't move as much. He seemed almost in a trance, like he couldn't stop himself from looking at the photo or at the moving video, at the smile that All Might gave, at the security that he felt when seeing it. He wondered to himself how exactly he could be like that, to be that powerful, to be that strong, for people to know that he's a beacon of hope. But these thoughts were a little complex for a 5-year-old, and of course he didn't quite articulate them that way. But he do understand one thing. He wanted to be just like All Might. Inko turned the TV off after the video had finished playing for the fourth or fifth time, and she began to fix him dinner. Izuku had begun to pester her, since around this time he was turning 5, and as we all know, children start to get their quirks around that time. So he was bugging her to go to the doctor. Now Inko had really been dreading this, because to her knowledge, children that would have had quirks more likely than not would have started exhibiting signs or at least showing that they would have had one. She knows he didn't get a mutation unless his hair is a mutation, but there's no real way to know that, especially with what she knows. But she throws that out of the window. She's very afraid because she doesn't want her son to not have a quirk. He seems very well set on being like All Might, or at least being a powered individual, so she doesn't want that for her child. Izuku begins to say more and more about how he wants to go and who wants to go. Inko tells him that this Friday they'll go. Izuku says yay and jumps up into the air, and Inko catches him, using her telekinesis to lift him onto a seat and provide him his food. We fast forward throughout the week till the Friday. Izuku is at school. Now, Izuku was always kind of strange, not in the sense that he was an outcast, but in the sense that he was a person who was good at everything. Izuku was smart, he was athletic, and he was very, very good in class and studies. It was pretty much the easiest life you'd imagine. He and his friend Bakugo tended to do just about everything together since they were so high in their public status. Bakugo had recently gotten his quirk, which was Explosion, and Bakugo had begun to tell Izuku that this quirk made him a A-class. He was definitely going to be one of the best heroes in the world, if not the best. Izuku had told him that that was good for him and that he wished him all the luck he needed in his endeavors. Bakugo didn't really know how to respond to this, because in Bakugo's mind he kind of saw them as rivals, as competitors. They weren't enemies, but they weren't always friends. Whenever there was an opportunity for them to be on opposite sides, they would always go all out, leaving nothing left. Definitely trying to win with the best of their abilities. Bakugo didn't really appreciate this response, and he told Izuku as much. He told him that he wanted their rivalry to continue, that he didn't want to be the number one hero if it just meant that he was going to just get it for free. He wanted Izuku to compete with him, to win over Izuku. That's the only reason it mattered. Izuku told him that if he got a quirk, or when he got a quirk, he would compete with Bakugo, but not a moment before. Bakugo, knowing when to settle his losses with Izuku, just shrugged his shoulders and said okay, and then went on his way. Now, one thing, as you can imagine, when you're 5 and desperately wanting to get superpowers, he couldn't wait. His mother approached with their car, and she checked him out from school. After she did so, they began their way to the doctor's office. After a very short drive, with Izuku losing his mind at the mere prospect of going, they went. Well, they were there already. Izuku was ecstatic. Words could not describe how excited he was to get his quirk. When Izuku got to the facility, they began to run a series of tests. But at first, to pretty much everyone's shock, especially the doctor, he didn't quite understand why nothing seemed to be happening. Izuku didn't have physical strength, durability, stamina, anything. He didn't emit anything. He didn't absorb or take anything. He wasn't really good at anything. He was, you know, normally to slightly above average athletic child, and that was it. The doctor began to run more and more tests, and he kept getting the same results. So eventually he came to Izuku and told him, "You are, you are." As he stuttered over his words, he began to look at Izuku's face, and the hope and Sorry for the short pause. I'm back. Continuing on. As Izuku saw the face of the doctor lost the will to tell him that he was quirkless, but he did so anyway. Izuku's heart was crushed. It was like something was gripping his heart, his chest. But literally, as Izuku began to slowly but surely lean more and more forward until he fell out of his seat, he began to groan in pain as his mother rushed to his aid to try to see what was ailing him. But no one knew. Izuku became more and more in pain as he tried and tried to get the relief as he clutched his chest, but nothing would seem to release the pressure. Eventually, the doctor called in the other doctors to see if they could get something to happen, but one of the doctors then said, "It's a reaction." They all looked at each other and didn't really think that was what was happening, but they all just decided to go with it. So the doctor that came in picked up Izuku and took him to a facility, a room. This room was for children that had particularly dangerous quirks, seeing as those types of quirks tend to have a very high cost on the person themselves. Think of things like the navel laser or Todoroki's ice and fire, like quirks like that, or like even dark shadow, things that can like hurt you or kill you even. Izuku was taken to this room with a very, very anxious Inko just sitting there watching. Eventually, after a few minutes, Izuku's hand loosened from his chest when all of a sudden a spark of flame appeared over his chest. He didn't know what it was, and he wasn't really in a position to wonder because he was so out of it. But for some reason, the flame began to move. It began to dance, almost like a firefly. It was curious. It was wandering. It was moving. When the doctors came in to see what it was, it immediately went up to them. But upon even getting close, it began to burn the protective gear off of their bodies, and they quickly rushed out and locked the door again. Izuku woke up about a few minutes later and saw the little bright dot. He began to play with it as it seemed to have no negative effects for him. Over the course of the 2.5 hours Izuku was in the facility, the spark of flame grew from a tiny little spark to a figure as big as he was. It was the size of him, and it was completely made of flames, and it seemed sentient. The doctors had never seen anything like this, and quite frankly, you could see it on their face. They were all shocked. A sentient quirk wasn't a thing that happened very often, but for a quirk to evolve that quickly in the range of 2.5 hours, it was unheard of. Things like this didn't just happen. They were wondering if they could even get the child to turn the quirk off or if this was a permanent manifestation of something. They asked Inko, as she was the mother and more likely than not their best option to get him to turn the quirk off, to ask him to do so. She quietly approached from the door, and the flame figure turned to her and saw her. It didn't move or make any attempt to do anything. It just looked at her intently, almost like it understood what Inko was trying to do, but still didn't care. Inko slowly approached more carefully, and with each step she slowed down her pace. Izuku noticed her and ran towards her and gave her a hug, but the flaming figure still stood there, not moving. Izuku was ecstatic that his quirk had manifested and he was jumping up and down, but Inko grabbed him by both shoulders and told him that in order for him to leave and to go home, he needed to deactivate his quirk. Izuku didn't really know how to do that, being a 5-year-old who had literally just finished waking up and had been so overjoyed by the prospect of having a quirk in the first place. He didn't really know how to turn it off. So he did the only thing a 5-year-old would do. He walked up to it and told it to turn off. It did. To everyone in the room's surprise, even Izuku himself, it did. It just disappeared. The fire began to dissipate and slowly retracted into his finger and then was gone, like it had never existed in the first place. And what was even more is that the flames figure didn't even leave burn marks on the ground from where it walked. It was like it had never even existed. The only proof was the burned hole in Izuku's shirt from where it exited his body. Inko gave her son a very tight hug, and she began to cry as she was releasing all her worry. Izuku hadn't really known it, but he was scared, and he began to cry too in response to his mother's tears. The moment would have been very wholesome if one bald doctor hadn't been absolutely tweaking out in the background. He had no idea what was going on. All he knew was that he had to tell him that this needed to be reported immediately and that there was not a second to waste. He left immediately, pushing through all the other doctors, telling them that he had some kind of emergency to handle. He was lying. Izuku went home, and over the first few weeks, he was watched closely. The doctors made constant visits and kind of checkups to get him to keep his quirk under control. Inko even had a facility built with the money they had to help him better control his powers and give him a safer environment to use them. The fire figure didn't grow any more than that after Izuku first manifested it. Now we'll have a slight, well, not a slight, but we'll have a time skip. Let's say another 10 years. Izuku is 15 now, about to turn 16. He's had his quirk for quite some time now, and a lot of things have changed. For starters, Izuku has three more servants: wind, water, and earth. Now, Izuku manifested these other three on three separate birthdays. For a while there, his mother was worried he was going to keep having more, but it only stopped after that. When he turned 9 years old, his quirk officially stopped, quote unquote, by the doctor. They'd never seen a person whose quirk had kept evolving until the age of 9. This was unprecedented. So they began to study it. Hence, Izuku was trained rigorously, or at least to the extent the authorities were allowed by Inko in the first place until she got tired of it. So he had very good control over his quirk. We see Izuku walking down from his room. His hair is grown out. He uses some kind of band to keep it back and just kind of relaxes. He's walking down the stairs yawning when he sees a flaming figure with a female figure cooking breakfast. Behind that is all of the others. Izuku greets them, and it seems as though they greet him back, although no words received or words are said. After this, Izuku begins to sit down and waits for his breakfast. With that, I think we're going to end this episode. I wanted to continue a bit more, but I think this is a good place to stop since there's a lot of information and I don't really want to rush past it. So instead of doing that, I'm going to give you a second episode, but only if you guys want to see the second episode. So if you do want to see that, leave a like, comment. Tell me what I can improve on. If there's anything you notice, any kind of glaring things that you just want to spot out, just let me know. So yeah, without any further ado, peace.